This is Chase, and joining me today is Dave Moore, the Heritage and Digital Asset Manager for Carhartt. Thanks for joining me today.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the podcast. We've been doing this History of Gear series. We're coming up on a year. We did our first history episode really when everything started to shut down last year, March. And I just started talking with Bruce Johnson, who is he's an amateur. I hate calling him an amateur historian, but he's not formally trained, but he's been preserving the history of outdoor brands and interviewing some of these gear pioneers, and he's built a website called the History of Gear. And that's where this started a year ago, is having conversations and trying to help preserve the history of the industry. And then it's since grown into kind of a sub-series within the History of Gear series. We talk with corporate archivists about the work that they're doing and how important it is. So appreciate you being on to talk about all the work that you're doing at Carhartt. It's a whole field I wasn't really familiar with, is this world of corporate, being a corporate archivist.
Until I got into it, neither was I. So
right. Well, that's what I want to learn more about, is how you got into this space.
Sure. Yeah.
First of all, what was your connection to the, Carhartt is kind of outdoor, but more and more it's now fashion, right? And workwear. It's a lot of things to a lot of different people. This is mostly outdoor focused, but did you have a connection to the outdoor industry? Even though Carhartt's not necessarily traditional outdoor, did you have a connection to the outdoor industry?
I mean, just in the sense that, I'm born and raised here in Michigan. I live just outside Detroit. So growing up as a Michigander, you spend a lot of time, as we say, up north. So there's always plenty to do in the outdoors between camping, and I did a lot of off-roading and that kind of stuff growing up. So in that sense, just kind of wearing it as outdoor gear, more so for me. Only probably spent a total of about a year of my life doing manual labor jobs. So for me, it was always more of an outdoor thing, and I won't get too much into it, but that's kind of always been the thing for us, is that we're very much in a workwear space and have been since the 1800s. But it's always served that double role, I think, for most people who are also outdoor enthusiasts. It's just as durable in the woods as it is on the job site. So
that's an interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, because I talked with a recurring guest of ours, Dr. Rachel Gross, and she's the one actually writing this this paper, and soon to be a book, from buckskin to Gore-Tex, and she's kind of looked at the outdoors and people's relationships to the outdoors, and for a lot of people, 1800s, right, the outdoors was work, right? That's where you would go to work. And so there is a natural connection between workwear and outdoor products, right? Because the outdoors, so much, that labor happened in the outdoors, right? Whether it's farming or ranching or whatever it might be. So I think it's an interesting intersection.
Yeah, for sure. In Carhartt's case, the formation of the brand with Hamilton Carhartt in the 1880s was the railroad. That's where we started. That was how the company first started, was essentially him working as kind of a traveling salesman and interacting all the time with these railroad workers, and them kind of telling him where their gear fell short and where it wasn't designed for them, and where it would rip and where it didn't have the right pockets and all that kind of stuff. So his initial impetus for starting the company was saying, can I create something using this, honestly, consumer research, consumer insights, as you'd say, today, to build something that's high quality and purpose built. So that was how it all started, and obviously extremely rugged conditions working on the railroad to start, and then expanding, and especially as you got into the 1900s, focusing more on farming and the trades and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, definitely. Actually, one of the first real world photos that I was able to find of someone wearing Carhartt, that wasn't our kind of marketing stuff of the time, was some image I found in the Library of Congress that was, a railroad construction going on in Alaska in about 1915. So,
Wow.
That was, you don't get much more rugged than that as far as your work gear having to deal with the outdoors. So yeah, definitely. Totally agree.
It reminds me of kind of a similar story, I guess, to a Filson, right? An outdoor outfitter right? Outfitting people to go and along the gold rush, right? Like that was the motivation for them. It wasn't like we're a true outdoor company. We are workwear. Like we're helping these people go to these really hard tasks, right? It's like mining for gold or building the railroad. It is interesting how that connection between work and the outdoors and it is interesting because these are some of the established longstanding companies that I guess we would consider outdoor companies, and some there's some of the oldest, which is interesting. Those ties back to the railroad or the gold rush or these big events in the country. But how
Yeah,
did you?
definitely.
Oh, go. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that, another thing about Carhartt too was that, obviously always started as a workwear brand first and foremost, but I mean, all the way back in 1930, we had an entire line that we released called Super Ducks, which was specifically designed for the outdoors. So
Hmm.
even in the, somewhat early years of the company, there was an entire product line created for hunting, fishing, camping. I want to say there was even like one or two products that were like golf,
Hmm.
even like golf, like outdoors stuff.
Hmm.
So there was even a recognition early on that, our consumers were the type of people that would be doing that kind of stuff. So the idea of purpose building, water repellent, and all that kind of, waxed products and that kind of stuff was definitely something that was part of the early history of the company too.
I think it's really interesting. Companies from that time or slightly after, like an LL Bean or an Eddie Bauer, even Filson, right? It's like these are all the names of people, right?
Hmm.
I think that's really interesting that back then, like you bought stuff from someone you knew and trusted, right? Like, and
Yeah.
that name brand like communicated this trust, this loyalty. It's really interesting. I don't know if you have insights or thoughts into that, but I think it's interesting that around that same time period, it was people, right, who were making these products and their name eventually became trusted and now have become these, massive brands.
Yeah, definitely. For us, it's I can't speak so much to other brands, not having maybe like, the deep knowledge of the, early marketing and stuff that I do of ours, obviously. But it's actually come up quite a bit lately because when the pandemic started, we really shifted a lot of the way that we were talking to our consumers away from selling, to really, establishing this thing where, what traditionally you would call your influencers. We don't really like that term. We actually sort of branded that as our friends of Carhartt, and that was something that we've been working on over the past year. And so a lot of the insight that I've provided for that initiative comes from our early years and the language that was used by Hamilton Carhartt and by our marketing and like even newsletters that you could get at your local retailer when you went and bought Carhartt, and was a couple year period where we actually had these consumer facing newsletters they could pick up and read. And so much of it was focused around this idea of friendship. Like one of the quotes we always throw around from Hamilton is he said, "When I make a sale, I make a permanent friend." And that was so much of the way that he wanted to position himself. And it appeared all the time in our marketing, this idea of friendship and trust and, coming from the quality of the garment, that, it's going to last you a long time and all that. Um, Kind of in a way, I see it all the time with stuff we get back from consumers too, where they'll honestly, we'll have people send a jacket back to us that's completely trashed because they couldn't like bring themselves to throw it away. Most usually the letters will say something along those lines. And you see that it's almost like because you're doing this hard work and you're providing for your family and probably, keeping your family farm alive or something like that, there's like a friendship you almost have with the clothes because it's kind of your armor when you're doing the things you need to do to get the job done. So people develop a real interest. I never would have thought that before kind of getting into this and reading all that stuff that comes in, that people would have such a connection to a piece of clothing,
Well,
which is really cool.
Well, I think the way that we look at clothing is so different, right? Because like you said, it's that clothing is their armor, right? It's in some ways, and in some of the other, categories that we get involved in our program, like some of your clothing is personal protective equipment, right? Like if you're
Hmm.
climbing or, in your cold weather environments, like this stuff, it's life or death, right? And
Right.
in a work environment, it is protection, right? So that
Oh
that
yeah.
is super important.
And those are stories too that we get, that I have in the archives, whether it's a letter someone wrote us or things, people have pulled over the year from newspapers or something where someone, I remember one where someone was, got in an accident on their snowmobile and was thrown from their snowmobile, and they were, couldn't move, couldn't get up. So they were stuck in the snow for hours, and they like wrote us to say, I owe my life to my Carhartt coveralls or whatever they were wearing because they kept them warm while they were in that situation, or somebody having the fabric getting, gumming up a machine that's about to yank their arm into it or something, and writing us and telling us like, had I had a, thinner jacket on or a less heavy duty fabric on, I might, be missing a hand. So
Right.
it's not hard to make that connection to really realize the connection that people have to the clothing.
Well, I'm going to get ahead of myself a little bit, but I think it's a good transition point. But I think with archives, those types of stories, and with the long history that you have, like this, you've got 100+ years of history with people and stories, and brands would kill for that, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that level of authenticity and this track record, and just the loyalty and what this brand means to people, right? It's like you can't replicate that. And I think that's one of the key values of having an archive, right? Is to be able to just take care of that, that perception, take care of that, those stories, because you can't replicate that. I imagine you encounter that every day. That's got to be a huge value for having a collection within a brand like this.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I talk about a lot, when we're talking about marketing or new product development or something, and the way the heritage can be involved is, any brand can come out and say like, we've always been committed to this, or this has always been the foundation of who we are and all that. But if you don't have the archive, and you don't have those documents and the ability to, hopefully have someone to do the research and all that kind of stuff, then I mean, that's how you back it up. I when we make claims like that, it's like, well, you can just come to me and I can show you the the materials and the product and the marketing and the people's stories and things that we put out to say, it's not just, we're not just saying that, it's right here. I can show it to you. So people have been very appreciative, and I don't, if you were going to get into it, I don't want to preempt it, but just the things that I've noticed since I came in, because there really was no formal archive before. People in so many different departments, within the company, and then our consumers too, that I do interact with. They're just so appreciative to have that level of knowledge and detail to be able to tap into.
I think people see through that, right? I think customers are more savvy than ever, right? And
Mm-hmm.
they can see through a fake, right? They have enough information. Like the internet is the great leveler, right? It's like we all have information, and we can find out, what a brand means or what they're about. And again, it's just, you can't replicate time.
Mm-hmm.
You can't make that up. 100+ years of history and connection with people. And there's not that many 100-year-old brands out there, right? There's not that many 50-year-old brands out there, and that means
Right.
something.
Yeah.
Which it just goes a long way. And then an added level to that, right? Like having the commitment to, you can be around for a long time, which is an accomplishment in and of itself. But if you have the stuff, right, to back it up and actually
Mm-hmm.
tell those specific stories like you are, that's another level, which I think
What's
is
interesting
impactful.
what's interesting too is that as I've seen, and I think more in recent years too, is that, companies like Carhartt that are that old and can have that history to back up what you're doing now, or inform it, or provide insight, or what have you. I really see like younger, I've seen, being in the kind of the corporate archives community, I've seen younger companies making an effort now to do this kind of stuff. I mean, even relatively new companies. I think when you see an older brand who, has that documentation of its history and where it came from and all that, that translates to anybody. A brand new startup, there's something to be said for having this idea from the beginning, to document and to save and to, keep all those things, because they're going to be important down the road. And that's an interesting thing with my job too, is as much as I get to deal with the cool old stuff with the heart-shaped buttons from back in the day and all these really neat historical things. I'm always emphasizing to the people now and new product and innovative new things we're doing now with new technologies and all that, that it starts to get a little daunting because you're trying to make sure that you're, you know, catching all that too at the same time, because 50 years down the road, that's going to be important too, or even 10 years down the road, it's going to be important.
Right.
So
I'm glad you brought that up. It was something I was going to mention, and I'm glad you brought it up now. It's a topic that I bring up with other corporate archivists and companies, and it's like, how do you preserve that material that is going to be history, right? And I know I talked with the Burton archivist, and he actually has to buy one of every product as it releases so that it gets to him, right? It's kind of, the burden is on him to make sure that he gets all the material that's coming out. And I think there's kind of, I imagine there's more of a renewed focus on this. I don't know what's really driving it, but part of me feels like the collaboration culture that exists now, like so many brands are collaborating, and you've got limited releases, and these, you've got just small runs of product that are launching. I imagine companies are recognizing, oh yeah, like we need to hold on to one of those, right? It's like, because it's this limited thing. It's I think I was talking with someone at a major sportswear company, and they said, yeah, we didn't start like holding on to new product that was releasing every year until 2013. It's like we just weren't doing that before. Like we didn't have the infrastructure or the systems in place to, take one of everything and send it straight to the archive. So what does that look like for you? How do you, is that burden all on you to go and gather everything, or is there a physical collection of items as well that you're getting one of everything, and preserving the objects as well? What does that look like to preserve this new history that you're producing every day?
well, the short answer is it's very tough.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff, it's and I can see it just, I've always seen it just going through our catalogs over the years, and it's just, the page count just gets higher and higher every year,
Yeah.
so you're producing more every year. You don't know what is going to be worth saving too. Something might come in for a year and then go out, and it's like, well, is this really historically important? So as you said, for sure, the collaborative stuff, the special edition stuff, the limited releases, that's kind of the easy part. That's the part where people tend to think of you more too, tend to think about the archive more when it's something. Just over the last few years, we've done several collaborations with Guinness product, and actually did one last year with some logos from their archives on our stuff, which was, of course, very close to my heart, which was awesome. And we've done, we did a line with Hurley over the last, I think it was last year or the year before. So those are the kind of things where people will tend to like think to reach out to me to say, oh, we should get Dave, the set of this stuff. But
It feels like more of a moment, I guess, for people, right? It's like
yeah,
releasing, a new iteration of a product is just like, well, that's just another season, right? Where,
yeah.
oh, this is an event, right? This is
hmm
something new and different.
Yeah, I really try to focus my effort, because it is a lot on me for the normal mainline stuff, and of course I'm just one person, and we're getting we're going to be opening and moving into a new, our first purpose-built archive space, in which I was able to, later this year, where I was able to plan for the future a bit, and you try to avoid that question of, well, how much stuff do you have? How much room do you need? I go, well, I don't want to tell you how much I have right now, because this is we need to build for growth for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just try to keep abreast of like new technologies we might be putting into garments. We've done a lot lately with upping the warmth factor on our cold weather gear. Over the last 5 to 10 years, we had this big new product called Force that was a dry fit type technology. Those kind of new things that are definitely out of the box are what I try to focus my efforts on. And then I just kind of lean on our merchandising team each season to kind of get their thoughts on like what we should keep. And the good thing is, kind of good and bad, is that one of our current design leads, she was sort of instrumental back in the 90s of really establishing the formal product design department at Carhartt. So she's a real pack rat, and that department has a lot of stuff saved. So it's sort of like I kind of know that they're saving a lot of stuff, and eventually when we have this new space and things, we'll be able to do a better audit of what we should save out of her pieces. But yeah, it's tough too with so many iterations of everything too. There's so many prototypes done, and it's do you kind of save the whole process? Do you keep the finished product? There's so many questions that you have to ask yourself all the time, and you'll go crazy if you think about them too much. But yeah, I just try to catch as catch can, I guess. Probably not the best archival term for it, but yeah, the pipeline is really a lot on me. So um, I just try to insert myself into whatever line development meetings and things I can to use my judgment as to what's going to be, have some staying power. And then the other side of it too, that's a little bit easier, is we have our chore coat, our Detroit jacket, our active jack are all kind of, icons within us and kind of the workwear community. So, we've done some pretty significant redesigns on those and updates. So, those are the ones I kind of always have on my list. When we do an update with this kind of iconic product, I always make sure to get, a version of it post update. So I kind of have these sampling techniques too that I use.
Right. Well, one thing that you mentioned there resonated with me is this idea of you could, I don't know, you could agonize over everything that you don't have, right? Or like there is a point where you just have to make the call, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think about that with our collection, and I'm not a trained archivist. I'm kind of more out there trying to gather the materials, and we've got our trained archivists here who would do all, do what they do. And I'm just rounding up material. But sometimes I think about it and I'm like, I'm constantly thinking there's collections out there that I don't know exist, right? And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
that is a little maddening. Like
Well, and
but
Chase,
I
I
don't know
wouldn't
where
be
to find
too
them, you know?
I wouldn't be too hard on yourself either, because I would say most archivists would tell you that um, they definitely didn't learn the most out of getting their degree, out of their coursework. I can speak to that for sure, because I really didn't have any kind of background in textile preservation, or so much of um, there's such a difference between kind of the archives education and the ideas in like within museums and stuff of collections management and stuff like that. So much of what I did focused on, paper records and
Yeah.
imagery, and photographs and potentially some media, multimedia. But, when it comes to like 3D artifacts and clothing and collections, you're just kind of learning a lot of it on the fly, which
Right.
was, a lot of what happened to me when I came to Carhartt.
Right. Well, along those lines, I know we kind of jumped over part of your history. I wanted to come back to it, so I'm glad
Sure.
you
Yeah.
mentioned that. How did you get into, like, what did you study? Where were you always interested in history? Like, what led you down this path? I know you mentioned not even realizing that this was a career, something that you could do. Like, where did that initial interest start for you?
Yeah, it's I've always kind of said in like the archives world, I'm sure there are some, but it's not something you're running around your house as a kid, talking about how you're going to grow up to be an archivist.
I thought it was, fireman, astronaut, archivist, right? Like,
Yeah,
isn't
no,
that
it's
it?
right in there. Um, I was always the short answer is I've always been interested in history. I have my Indiana Jones poster here on the wall right
Yeah.
behind me, which was probably, I always say that's when, my dad sat me down and showed me Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was probably the first like non, Disney kids movie I ever saw. And I was pretty much smitten with history from there. Come to, of course, to my chagrin, find out that it's not all, bull whipping across chasms and, stealing idols off of off of pedestals. But yeah, I didn't really, it wasn't until I actually got to college that I kind of, to undergrad, that I made the connection that, this is what I should do for a living. I was always kind of one to flit from thing to thing and be interested in one thing one week and a different thing the next week. And it took me kind of into my first semester or two of undergrad in college at Michigan to realize that history was what I should do, and I didn't know really what to do. So I just decided to become a teacher. So I became I got my degree in undergrad in education, secondary education for social studies and history and geography and all that kind of stuff. So when I graduated, it was 2008, and I wasn't able to find a job. So I substitute taught for a few years, did some kind of odd jobs. I worked at a kennel for a while, and then I actually got a job. I decided to go back to school to get my MA in history at Wayne State University in Detroit, and I started working as kind of a minimum wage frontline job at the Henry Ford Museum, which was here in Metro Detroit in Dearborn. And I grew up going there. My dad worked there actually during summers in college. My grandpa worked there as his career for many years. He was an electrician, taking care of these historic homes and electrical stuff out in this area called Greenfield Village there. So I kind of had a history there, and I worked there while I was going to school, and got my degree in history, my MA in history, and was actually pretty much a little bit too far along that track before I realized that archives was really my interest. I saw an opportunity when I was getting my MA to get, I could minor in sort of a subject area, or I could minor in archival administration, and then a few extra credits, and you could get a graduate certificate in archival administration. And I was way too far down the MA path, writing my thesis and everything. Which was about European colonialism in Southern Africa, which of course has a lot to do with what I do now. But so I finished that, and I got my degree in archival administration, my certificate. And while I was getting that, I was offered a job with a regional company that did all sorts of consulting and contracting for both digital asset management and corporate archives. So I started working with them on kind of a different project, and it started to be talked about among the, in the office, that they were talking to Carhartt, and that Carhartt was looking to start an archive. And I'd always been a big fan of the brand. I used to steal, my dad's Carhartt clothes out of his closet and wear them. So I decided I was going to just try and lobby for that. So I wasn't a huge fan of the project I was working on. So I just started sort of wearing my beanie to work every day, and kept asking our managers, what's going on with Carhartt. And so in 2014, that company started a contract with Carhartt because they were celebrating their 125th anniversary. And they had, I have to give her a shout out. Her name's Cheryl Poloni. She's the executive admin for the president of the company, Linda Hubbard, and then the CEO and family descendant, Mark Belade. And she was always the one who was like the history minded person. She was always the one that had to go digging around in this closet for, the stuff that was saved. And so she really was the driving force behind bringing in someone with, trained archival background to do an inventory just of what they had. And that's really what I came in. I came in to just kind of inventory everything, get stuff stored properly in proper archival storage solutions. And it pretty quickly became evident that couldn't be it. People were coming to me pretty quickly, wanting to get, historical insight for things they were working on, or even just digitizing old ads and things like that. And so it pretty quickly became clear to me, to lobby for this to become a permanent thing. And it wasn't too hard of a sell to the company to do that, because they were really getting a lot of value out of it. So long-winded story. I'm not, I tend to tell long stories, but that's kind of the whole way it went.
What year was that?
That was in 2014.
Okay.
There's a kind of a joke among some corporate archivists that, when a company starts an archive, there's usually two reasons why. Either they have an anniversary or they have a lawsuit.
Yeah.
And luckily ours was the anniversary situation.
Yeah.
But also in kind of typical form, we didn't start it until that year. So, nobody's usually thinking that, oh, we should probably get this going a few years ahead so that we can have all this stuff, kind of ready to go for this big 125th anniversary. But
Right.
It was awesome nonetheless, to get brought in and be able to turn it into a career. So
Yeah, that is really common. I interviewed the Gore archivist as well, and they started theirs, I think, at their 50th.
mhm.
That does seem to be the common thing. But it's really interesting how you were able to lobby for that, and it's a credit to like management for valuing that. I'm curious. I imagine you think about that a lot, right? It's like archives are only possible if there's funding in place, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah,
there's some companies that it's like, okay, it's kind of an afterthought, like someone's doing it, it's a pet project, but that person could leave, right? And then all
mhm.
that institutional knowledge leaves with them and process, and so there's like huge value in getting like institutional support, right? For something more permanent. You know,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's really, I mean, it's a massive part of what it's all about. I think it's, a thing that's, I mean, I wouldn't say necessarily unique to business archives, but certainly much higher on the totem pole of, things you have to constantly be focusing on is that ROI, that, making sure that you're tracking what you're doing and showing the impact that you're having, and not just kind of, people will come to you with requests, of course, specific things they're looking for, but keeping abreast of the, when's the, what are the initiatives with some new product line that they're planning a couple of years out, what are we trying to focus on for marketing next year, trying to plug yourself in order to say, oh, well, you're working on this, I have this specific historical story or product, or something. I mean, anniversaries are huge too, as far as the company, but also for us, products. I mean, people love I think in 2017 we had the 100th anniversary of our chore coat, and which was a date that was established by the archive. It was always just kind of referenced as sort of a circa date that it was established, but we were able to go in and find some ads that hadn't been seen before to solidify that. But we had that chore coat celebrating its 100th anniversary. We had our K87 pocket, that Carhartt pocket t-shirt was 25 years old. And then our watch cap, our beanie, the A18 that you see everywhere, that was turning 30. So we actually had this nice like watershed year, which again, that helped me sell the idea that we needed to have more history articles on our website, because I could say I can write up 3 articles about these different products that of course we're going to be selling hard this year, and then when you put stuff on social or do whatever, you can link to this article, and then you have a nice history with some images and fun facts that people didn't know, like the fact that our watch cap, the most popular Carhartt item that you see everybody wearing, no matter who they are these days, is something that started off as a gift with purchase. It was a promotional item in 1987, and then here we are today. So those kind of fun facts are what keep people interested in what's going on.
you mentioned some of the ways that you, I guess, quantify your impact, right? Like, because so much of this is like speaking the language of the business, right? It's like, what is the
Mm-hmm.
ROI of an archive? Like, are there some specific things that you do to communicate that value? There's no question there's value, right? If you just look at what you're doing, but how do you communicate that to different people within the company who need to hear like that value communicated in different ways? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does make sense. And it's, I'll start off by saying, like, in a part of the business, I mean, I sit and report up through the creative marketing department too, which is, to some degree, I mean, there's all sorts of, KPIs and things you can do, but really it's the part of the business where it is a little bit more qualitative, right? It's a little bit more like, how do you directly show that what you're doing is resulting in more sales or more brand awareness? I mean, there's ways to do it, obviously, so for me, a lot of it started off with having a lot of involvement with our social media department. So that was a good way in which, I had, when we had specific heritage related posts or videos or things that we did, you could take those numbers and show, and by and large, they performed very well. People love to learn about the history. So it wasn't too hard to show that, like, hey, these posts and things are doing really well. The other piece of it too is just inserting yourself into those different campaigns or product lines, or, if you actually have something that you're selling that has a heritage influence where you actually worked with, product design on developing it and it does well, then you can point to that and say,
Yeah.
this is having an influence on it as well. But the other thing too that, I have to admit, like, I certainly love the sexy stuff, the outward facing stuff, but just as important is HR, new hire orientation, getting people a background in the company when they're new, and may not know something, and you have a resource to show them. So a lot of mine too would just kind of come by collecting sort of quotes from people and feedback from new hires as to, like, how they felt that helped them establish a connection with the company, getting involved in employee initiatives and in events that we do to keep employee engagement, through the heritage. So it's a little bit more qualitative. It was kind of, for sort of a yearly report that I do where I sort of outline the, the different major projects we've worked on and the impact those have had. So it's kind of a little loosey goosey is the short answer, I suppose. But I really think the most meaningful for Carhartt, and this is probably not the case with every company, especially depending on the industry, is getting the kind of, feedback and quotes and testimonials from people that have worked with you and how they have seen it influence the work they've done, and how it's informed them and helped them do a better job at whatever they're doing.
Right. What was this? I know you mentioned that you really started the archive at Carhartt, but there had to have been materials around. What was the state of things when you showed up? Like, materials just in a box in a closet, stuff spread out all over the place? Like, what did you have to work with?
No, it was boxes in a closet for
Okay.
sure.
Yeah.
I actually worked out of said closet for several years, until I started in it. We had an internship program, and I decided, well, we probably shouldn't have to share this tiny closet. So
Yeah.
I, got a cubicle that was right outside the room. But that said, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. I would say, from what I've seen in other situations, um, it was pretty darn good, to be honest. There was no leaking pipes. There was, it was a relatively stable environment. Um, but yeah, I always, I don't know. I've probably used several different terms for them throughout the years, but you're thankful to sort of the archive champions since the 1800s that didn't know they were archive champions. You had certain people who were pack rats, and certain people, that saw the importance of saving things. So, really, when I first came in, there was some decent labeling on some of the boxes and stuff. So you just start pawing through everything and getting your Excel out and just making a big spreadsheet and trying to figure things out. One of the funny things I would say was that I was so sort of naive when I first started that I'm sort of entering, metadata information about the stuff into a spreadsheet, and I'm using like different tags, and I'm tagging catalogs with like jackets, coats, belts, like, this isn't useful. Like, they're in every catalog.
Yeah.
This isn't going to help me search or find anything. So, yeah, I mean, the state of it was pretty good. It was pretty limited, though, from a garment standpoint. I think a lot of the stuff that they had, which wasn't a ton, was on display in the lobby of the building at the time. And then there was a few sort of just random garment racks of things. So a big project for me, as I was able to get buy-in and sort of get dollars, allocated my way, was to say, if we want to do this, we got to be out buying stuff. We need to spend the money to fill in the gaps. So we went from that to, I think at this point, having 500 plus, legacy garments and accessories and things like that. So yeah, it was, I can't complain. People did, a good job, I think, of saving what was there. And, you start getting into that process of, okay, I know what's here. What do we keep?
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that sometimes gets lost in archives too. With your average person, it's like, well, it's this big giant warehouse. Maybe you imagine Indiana Jones, big warehouse, everything is saved. And oftentimes the job of the archivist is more thinking about what to get rid of rather than what to keep in those situations.
We've had that experience a little bit. We're trying to preserve mostly print materials and have a large catalog collection. And so we've talked with different corporate archivists and about, collecting duplicate catalogs, right? And a couple of the companies that I've talked to, they said, "Oh yeah, we've got a full collection of ours, but we routinely get customers sending us old catalogs, and we don't know what to do with all of this, so we just put them in a box and let employees take them." So and for me, where we're trying to build out a pretty robust catalog collection here, I'm the first to say, well, send us your duplicates. So
Right.
that I imagine that's a constant battle for you, trying to figure out what to hold on to, what holds his historic significance, I guess, for the company. That's got to be a tough call in certain situations. Do you feel any weight having to make that decision?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, less so now, but especially early on. I mean, especially being a contractor too at the time, kind of a consultant coming in initially and not actually working for the company like I do now. Um, I wouldn't throw anything away. I didn't want to throw anything away. I didn't want to be the one to have to make that decision. It was hard. And then you look back later and, to your point with the catalogs, you realize you have 6 copies of the same catalog and you're like, well, why do I have 6 copies? And what I've found, with that is, there's certainly best practices for that kind of stuff, that you can use as a guide, but, and a lot will be like, well, you keep a physical copy and then, you digitize it and then you have, your digital backup. And for me, we've always had fun in different locations and different places, like putting catalogs on just, if it's got a cool cover or something from back in the day, we'll put it on display. So, I like to I try to keep 2 if I can, because, I like to make sure I have a crisp one in the folder in the box and one that I can put on display if I want to. But yeah, and it's, the interesting thing too is when you're moving out of a building or you're doing something and you're sort of trying to encourage people to save stuff or give you stuff, that's what you usually end up with, is you end up with someone giving you a drawer full of catalogs, when really in my mind I'm like, well, I want, do you have a folder full of memos related to a big project you worked on or something? Like the archives side of it is kind of the unique, which is generally the difference between an archive and a library. A library is something can be accessible in many places, whereas an archive, your big focus most of the time is, I'm the only source for this, something that's original. And so yeah, I don't know if that quite answers the question, but
No, it definitely does. Yeah, we've kind of been pigeonholed that way. We're a new collection, but I think a lot of people look at us and think we're a catalog collection, and we're happy to be that because there isn't any other catalog collection out there that we're aware of for this industry. So we're happy to take on that title, but at the same time, I'm with you. I want to preserve the mundane, right? It's like I want the stuff that went into creating the catalog. Like I want those memos. I want sketches of product, and and recently we've had some good success talking to early employees from different companies, and we've gotten sketchbooks, right, of influential products from key brands. And we recently got a balance sheet from 1968 from one of these outdoor brands. That's amazing to look at. We got the layout of one of their US factories, and there were names on the tables of like who worked at each sewing station, right? What products were they working on? It's like that brings a level of humanity to the work, right?
Oh yeah.
Which I find really interesting. So we're interested in that area of like, yeah, give me the scraps of paper where you scribbled a note, or the napkin sketches. Give me that stuff in addition to the catalogs.
Yeah.
So we're trying to grow out of that.
And even catalogs too. I have some. A lot of the catalogs I have are, older ones are from one of our executives back in the day who saved them all, and some of the ones that he has are are ones that have scribbles in them, like oh, this price changed on this, or oh, we need to change, this product description shouldn't say this thing anymore, or whatever. So that's like, okay, you got a catalog like that, I will take a look at it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But we still have, it's frustrating. There's gaps, we have lots of gaps, and a lot of the stuff that I know about the early years of the company has been research I've done on my own, just through online newspaper repositories and going through archives of, what I have a drawing, a digital version of a drawing on these maps. They were called Sanborn fire insurance maps. And so the most detailed layout I have of our early factory is actually this thing that was done for fire insurance. It was extremely detailed, but I don't have that physical item in my collection. So, I'm there's the side of archives that's taking care of the stuff that you have. And then, especially in my situation, it's like, well, we need more information about the early years. People would always talk about how Hamilton Carhartt said, he started his business in this loft with like 2 sewing machines in Detroit, and we never knew where it was. And so it's chasing back all the way to like the first want ad I could find in the Detroit Free Press for, women with sewing experience to come assist and work there at the beginning. And then it had an address. So now we know where it was. So,
Wow.
you're sort of playing a little bit of a detective work, which consequently ended up being the first mention of Hamilton Carhartt and Company in a public facing, something that was public facing. So it was kind of a dual thing.
Yeah, I'm seeing so much interest from companies in that type of material, right? Like, oh, we want to know the first instance that we were, our brand was mentioned in this publication or this product. When, there's plenty of companies that have come to us and asked, do you know when our, this product was first mentioned in this
Mm-hmm.
catalog? And so, we're there's huge value in this work, and more I'm recognizing that people are starting to wake up to, brands are waking up to the need to do the work. I just hope that we see more people in your position, right? More commitment
Mm-hmm.
on the part of the company.
Yeah,
And
definitely. I
I
think with us, so much of it was just that, you had those people who were great that saved some things. But when you look back through what I have, you just realize that like the idea of keeping stuff and doing that was, we just operated a lot like, our gear is, it was kind of, and who our consumer is, so much of it was sort of like, I don't know if a ton of stuff wasn't saved, probably because it was just put your head down, do the work, get it done, and then you move on to the next thing. So much of that mentality I think is reflected in, what's saved and what's not. And I think, you're just trying to sell gear and keep the company and, profitable. And if you can do that, then maybe you're not thinking so much about keeping every piece of thing. But it makes the detective work more fun for me.
Of
So
course. Well, I know that's kind of the story of Patagonia and Yvon Chouinard. And I don't know this for sure, but I've heard a little bit that it's like, well, Yvon is all about just the future, right? It's like he's not worried about what happened in the past, right? But there's other people around the business who are like, no, but we really need to preserve this. So they have
mhm.
an archivist, and I don't know if you've met Val before, but they're doing some great things there. But it is interesting that like that mentality of, well, I'm just making cool stuff that helps me go climb, right? It's like, why is that historically significant, right? There's kind of that
Right.
mentality of that heads down, I'm just doing my thing. um I imagine there's a difference. I don't actually know a lot about the corporate, the history of Carhartt itself in terms of, being a family business and privately held versus,
Sure.
has it gone through acquisitions or any major changes that way? Because I know that's usually a huge disruption for companies, is when they get acquired or when they go public, that's when material starts to disappear, right? Or change hands. But it sounds like it's largely been uninterrupted.
Yeah, we, unfortunately never had to do that. There was, a time or two, especially in the years of the Depression and stuff, that
Yeah.
there was a danger of that, for sure, especially when you're, have always been sort of positioned as a premium workwear company. So,
Yeah.
when people have less money to spend, then it is what it is. So yeah, we've benefited, I think, from the fact that we've always been a private company, and that our, current, CEO is, a family descendant. So we're currently in the fourth generation, of leadership of the company, but the fifth generation, all of his kids also work for the company as well. So there's 5 generations of Carhartts in there.
Wow.
So yeah, I think it's helpful to some degree. We've actually even benefited a bit on the other side, because we acquired some pretty large companies in the 60s, and actually ended up getting some pretty important artifacts from their history too. So I have, there was two companies. One was Headlight Overalls, and another one was called WM Fink and Company, which is pretty popular in kind of the vintage circles, because they had some pretty, their sort of mascot on their ads was this pig, and there's some funny old signs of that company that are pretty popular. So when we took control of them, I guess somehow we also acquired like some of their executive minute books from all the way back to like the 1800s even. So I kind of almost have it the reverse, where I have some really nice, albeit limited, some nice pieces of history from companies that we bought over the years too. So I think we've benefited from it for sure. The fact that we've never changed hands or went public or had that kind of disruption to deal with.
Right. I'm sure do you have eBay alerts? Like, what are the things that you're looking for that you haven't found? What are the number one,
what am I looking for?
Top items.
I find, I've built a decent amount of the collection out through eBay, to be honest. I think also that's, in the sense of being the only guy doing it, it makes it difficult to kind of hit the road and really, go to vintage stores and search stuff out. I always do when I happen to be out of town and look for stuff and have people looking for stuff for me. But I just recently, some of the most meaningful stuff to me and the coolest stuff has actually come in, I think, through different ways. I had a guy recently reach out to our customer service department trying to get information about an old pair of overalls that he bought at a store that actually were our older overalls that even had the overall buttons that had the little heart-shaped buttons and stuff on them, which I honestly only had one pair in the archive. They're very difficult to find. So he reached out trying to get some information about them, and I was sort of helping, I was helping him out, and I like to do that with customers when they just want to know something about something they have. And then I was like, of course, I would be remiss not to ask you if you're, looking to part with these, perhaps. So we ended up, buying those from him. But yeah, I definitely have my eBay alerts. You just kind of search for vintage Carhartt, sort of go from there. I will tell you 100% that in the 7 years that I've been, almost 7 years I've been doing it, that the amount of listings you get for a search for vintage Carhartt on eBay is probably 8 or 9 times now what it was then, judging just by our popularity and people, knowing that they can get a decent chunk of change for selling something vintage that's Carhartt. But yeah, I use a lot of, online sources to try and do it. And also have had a few where, folks will reach out and are more interested to learn history of a garment, and if they're willing to part with it, then perhaps they will. I think the coolest, if I can for a second, the coolest acquisition process I ever had was, there's a gentleman who has a Instagram account, and he is always posting about like vintage tools and stuff. So he goes out and searches antique shops and stuff for vintage tools. And he posted something about how he found this old Carhartt game bag, like a hunting game bag, in his dad's garage, and cleaned it up and stuff as best he could and all this. And then a coworker of mine tagged me in it, and I ended up reaching out to him, and asking him about it, because I didn't have any of that kind of stuff. And he said it was this whole thing where his I think it was either his mother or his grandma got it for either his father or his grandpa. I can't quite remember his age, but when he got back from World War II, it was like a gift that she had bought for him, and it just ended up sitting around and all this. And so it just turned in this whole thing where he actually ended up in the end donating it to the archive rather than selling it to us, because he was just kind of a fan of the brand and thought it would be cool to have it in the archive. And so when someone donates something to us, I have special archive branded swag I send them, and they actually get a certificate of appreciation that's signed by both me and our CEO. And then we actually put together a historical display in our store in downtown Detroit with this whole timeline and all this stuff, with a section about our outdoors history, and we put it on display. And so now it's there on display with his I apologize. I can't remember if it was his father or his grandfather, but they're the one that's credited, because I asked him, oh, I want to give you credit on the display. He's like, well, give it to my grandpa, or give it to my dad, or whatever it was. Don't put my name on it. So it was just a really fun connection where it turned into this great interaction with somebody. So not as fun as trying to outbid people on eBay and trying to keep track of when all your auctions end, so that you can make sure that you get in and get that last push for something that you really want.
I think that's really cool, because archives, there can be this negative, or this, not negative perception, but there could be a barrier, right, between, like, whether it's a university archive or government archive, corporate archive, like there could be a barrier between, that keeps people from accessing or having a connection to the material. And that's why we started the Instagram account that we did for our collection, is to reach people where they're at and where they're already consuming content. And we know there's a very active design community that we thought would really like the covers. And I see that, with you, like, creating this very human, personal connection with people and giving people that experience, giving them swag right from the archive, like developing a personal connection with people is really special, and kind of breaks that barrier down that I think can exist between archives and people, right?
Yeah, especially in the corporate side of things, since by and large we're not open to the public to come look at and all that kind of stuff. And as another quick aside, I mean, we have a lot of history obviously outside of Michigan, especially in Kentucky. We've been operating in this same small town in Kentucky, Irvine, Kentucky, since the 30s, and a couple other areas that we might not be operating out of now, but there were Carhartt facilities there in the past. And so I've developed these fun relationships with people from these small historical societies of the town that are just super excited to talk about everything that and so many of the people that live there are obviously descendants of people that would have worked there, or in the case of Irvine, these family names that have been part of the company there since the 30s. So they're always really excited to talk about the history and kind of give those oral history experiences that you can't get any other way. The stories, the personal connection, how it's kind of knit into the fabric of the community. Those are really important to me too, to try and preserve and make sure that the stories are captured before of course they can't be captured anymore. So that's a really important part of things to me too.
Right. Well, I can, like, your excitement and interest in this work is contagious. Like, I'm like, get me on eBay. Let's let's try to find.
It's a lot nicer when you have a corporate account to be playing around with.
Yeah, we've been fortunate. We've got a pretty good buying budget.
That's good.
We've been fortunate to have that as well. And our archivist he's got his alerts for different brands. But we've been fortunate. We've had plenty of people willing to donate materials as well. I mean, our collection started off with a donation of 1,200 catalogs from one individual. So that's how ours was, really kickstarted. And
well, I'll have to keep you guys in mind now when somebody comes to me with that, fourth copy of a catalog I already have, and please, I'll make sure to put it aside.
That'd be great. No, because we really want to add Carhartt to our collection if we can. So yeah, I'm excited about what you're doing. I know we talked a little bit about more opportunities to work together in the future, which I'm excited about. But how's the best way for people to connect with you and stay up to date on what's happening in the archive? You mentioned you write some different stories about materials that are coming in, what you're doing. How can people stay in touch with you?
Yeah, it's that part of it has been a little stagnant lately. I won't go too deep into it, but we're actually doing a major overhaul of our website. So that's something we're working on. So I would say in that vein, definitely stay tuned. I have a lot of grand plans for representing the history, especially with capabilities we'll have in our new space to film things and do better photography of some of the pieces I have. But honestly, the best way to keep in touch with, I guess, both my personal life and my professional new stuff that's coming into the archive and all of that is just to follow me on Instagram. I think that's the number one thing I would say. And it's very easy. It's just Archive Dave. It's archive_Dave. And that's it. Right. So you get to see pictures of my dog, who unsurprisingly is named Indiana, and our new archive stuff that comes in. And then, we here and there, we'll do some stuff on Carhartt's own social media outlets, but where you can catch up on sort of what's been posted already is on Carhartt.com, on our main website. There is a Discover History section.
Okay.
So if you go to that section, you'll be able to see all the articles that have been posted thus far. And hopefully, in the near future, it will be, fully and without any restrictions open to the public. But we recently just completed on the second floor of our store in downtown Detroit, our flagship store, company store. We opened a place called the Carhartt Workshop. So among other things, it has a full timeline of the history of the company that includes kind of artifacts built into it. We have a Detroit Lounge that has other artifacts from the history of the company in there as well. And among that, you can, so if you're in the Detroit area, you could see that. And they also have a tool library where you can actually come in and check out tools if you have a project you need to work on for free. And we've just got all sorts of plans that, COVID threw a wrench into for community engagement and forums and history lessons. And Wayne State University in Detroit has one of the biggest labor history archives in the world. So we're hoping to do things with them about, labor history and blue collar work history and, with the trades and farming and all that kind of stuff. So there's a couple different avenues you can go down, but the newest in the archive you'll be able to see through my Instagram.
So. That's great. Well, and we'll link to those resources as well.
Cool.
In the description. So, Dave, this has been awesome. This is a fun conversation. We could go. I know both of you and I like to talk about this, so I'm sure we could do another one at some point and go even deeper. But
yes, I would be remiss not to say anybody, if you're listening and you're interested in history and you're someone who's in school or something like that, don't let the fear of the job market in that field weigh you down. There's a lot of different ways to break in, whether it's archives or information science or history teaching or all that. I do a lot of work with students, and I just always want to make sure to keep the spirits high. There is a way you can do it.
Well, yeah, you're proof that you can blend your interests, your passions, and your career. That's for
definitely
sure.
For sure, and get some pretty nice discounts on the gear you need when you go camping or working in the yard or working on the house. So
yeah, that's amazing. Dave, thanks. This has been great. I appreciate you taking time.
No problem.